welcome to Kitten Up Kitten. Today I am doing a whip on the Craftably canvas 13 Treasures. So this is a big canvas. Can't remember off the top of my head how big it is. Let's have a look. My name is Sam, hope you're well. I am doing a whip and chat today, but it's going to be a little bit different. So let me just find the details for this canvas. So this is 13 Treasures, 79 by 108 centimeters in rounds. So it is a round drill canvas. This is, as I've explained before, this is actually not my canvas. This is for my friend Penny, who otherwise known as Calb Sparkles. It's for her daughter. She didn't want to do it basically, so I'm doing it for her. So I am going to make a start. What am I using? I am using my pink cook tray. There are pink trays available on the Etsy website. Please do go over and have a look at those. I'm using the standard to work out of. I'm using my mini as a trash drill tray. Not sure why I didn't think of it before. I also have a little Diamond Art Club cover minder because I am working with tape on this one, and it's purely, I would normally use the amazing cover papers from Calb Sparkles, but because I keep this canvas rolled up because it's actually too wide for the space where I hang my canvases, so I have to roll it, and cover papers don't work well if you're rolling them up. They just don't. So what I'm going to do, because I've literally got a couple of this symbol down here, which is the letter B, I'm going to do that. I'm also using one of my soft grip pens. These are made with polymer clay. I am making more of these today because I need to crack on. Again, I will come to that. So let me just find this symbol. It is either, it's a B, there we go. Because I don't have many of these, but I have enough to make a start. How are you? Are you well? I do hope so. And I hope that you are using this opportunity to whip along with me. So the odds are that you will be listening and not watching. But I have some very interesting stuff to talk about today, or interesting for me anyway. It might not be for you. It is Thursday, and I have no work this morning. I don't need to be at my first job today, my only job today, until 12. So I thought I would make use of the time and I would get this whip filmed because this one's a little bit different. Update on any other news: there are trays available on Etsy. Description is in the description box, alongside the other information you may need if you're interested. So my email, Penni's Etsy shop, my Etsy shop, Penni's Facebook group. There's also a link for that. That is all in the description box where it usually is. If you are here for the very first time, welcome to my channel. I do hope that you will stay. We are growing steadily. And if you're coming back, hello again. So I just want to get this one colour done because I've got a smattering of these, but this canvas is actually does have some pretty decent areas of confetti, and you all know that I bloody hate confetti. I really do. It's needed because that's what gives us the detail, but I bloody hate doing it. There we go. And the odds are I will miss them anyway, but it's just, I've got the B. It's the first symbol that I saw. So we're going to get those out of the way. And it's one of those symbols, you see it, and then you think you've got them all, and then suddenly there's a load more. Yeah, didn't think that through very well. So today, I promised, I've had this question a couple of times from subscribers, where I have mentioned my faith, my spiritual leanings, you know, my belief system. And I've had a couple of people, you know, I've mentioned these things before. There's been some running jokes about me being a witch and all this sort of stuff. So I thought today I would share that. So first of all, there is no offence towards any other faiths, religions or belief systems. There is no hate for any of that. That is not what I am about. Secondly, please do respect my belief system the same way that I would respect yours. You know, it's quite important to me, and just recently I have been following more avenues which will make you understand why I'm loving doing this canvas so much. But yeah, no hatred allowed. If there is anyone making horrible comments to anyone about anything, you will be deleted, you will be removed. Please do grab yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a glass of wine if you're in the right time zone, you know, no judgment. Let's settle down. And I am going to start at the beginning. So this is going to be like a bloody story. So I hope you're ready. Before we go any further, if you are new, please do like, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because that will tell you when I post up. If you are coming back, thank you for continuing to keep coming back. I don't know what is wrong with you people, you know. But I love the fact that there are people out there like me that are a little bit strange, because I am. I also need to say that my channel has become monetized now, so you will see ads throughout the videos. Please do feel free to skip them if it's not your thing. Please note, however, that it does generate revenue for me, all but not a lot, but it all helps, and I'm grateful for every single penny. So if there's a 12-second video and you can handle sitting through it, please do. I would be very, very appreciative. So there we go, that is that. So I'm going to find this colour. I've got a bit of static in this one, so I'm not going to chuck loads out, but enough to get me going. So let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Right, so my history is that my parents grew up, met and married in a very small village in Lincolnshire. On my father's side, I know some of our genealogy because my father spent many years building a family tree. So I do know that in the 1600s, the branch that I am related to, a family came over from Ireland. So I know that I have Irish ancestry way back. And it is way back, it's generations back, but I do. And my father has always been very proud of that. He's been very proud of the fact he has traced our ancestry back. He's also very proud of the fact that although our name was anglicised somewhat, we are actually related to the lovely Michael Flatley, very distantly. Very, very distantly. So it is possible that our family name would have been Flatley, Flaherty, O'Flaherty, something like that, but we would have come from Ireland, not in the north. It would have been in the mid-Irish. So there is that. Okay, so my parents met and married as Church of England Christians. Okay, I was brought up in that faith. I went to a Sunday school which was run by the local Methodist church. So from a very young age I was taught about God and Jesus and all the good stuff. And you know what, I am one of them people, I do like being part of groups, I do. But there were also things going on with me as a small child which are very indicative of people that have some mediumistic skills, and by that I don't mean that I'm a full-on psychic, so don't ask me for the winning lottery numbers. I'm not going to be able to tell you, and if I could have told you, I'd have done it for myself. But you know, the ability to feel or sense or see or hear, and this ability, it was triggered by a few things. There was a couple of indicators, which is very common in people that are mediums. So number one, absolutely terrified of the dark. It is very, very common in mediums to be scared of the dark as small children, and I think this is because we can sense things in the dark that maybe other people don't, and I think that's the issue. So for me, a truly scary film would not be one where people are hacking people's heads off. It would be one where you can't see what's coming. Okay, makes sense. I also, as a very small child, had an imaginary friend, which is another indicator of those type of abilities. Now, I am not sitting here and saying that I am a full-blown medium. I am not. I'm just saying that these are things that happened. So throughout my life, there's been a couple of things that have happened. Now, the earliest one that I can remember, I must have been about 3 or 4, and I remember being awakened by somebody putting their hand on my head. You know, like how you go in to check that your kids are asleep and you just put your hand on their head because they look so cute when they're asleep. Well, that happened, and it was vivid enough that I woke up. I mean, it's vivid enough that I can remember it at nearly 52 years of age. This happened when I was 3 or 4. And because I was already going to Sunday school at that point, I automatically, there was nobody around, my mum and dad were in bed fast asleep, I assumed it was Jesus. And I spent a few years saying to people, Jesus, Jesus. And I'm not saying I'm wrong, it might have been. You know, what do I know? I was 3 or 4. But that's not my understanding now. So, when I was little, once I learnt to read, I was very much a big fan of fairy tales. They were the thing for me. Now, this started off with a range of books by Enid Blyton called The Wishing Tree. You will notice trees and moons figure a lot in my life. They are very important to me. You will notice from the diamond paintings that I do that I have a lot of fantasy, dragons, fairies, elves. You see where I'm going with this? So, yeah, I got into Enid Blyton and The Wishing Tree. And I am an avid book reader. I absolutely love reading. It is one hobby that I've always had since I learnt to read at the age of 4. And my safe places were always outside, near trees. Ideally, oh, my perfect place would be a little copse of trees where you're in the shade so the sun can't burn you, and there's a little babbling brook. That's me to a tip. That's my idea of bloody heaven. And I've always been drawn to that sort of thing, the outdoor life. This is why we go away in the caravan, because we go to these remote places, we pitch our caravan up, I head off and find the nearest tree to sit under because I burn in the sun, and I just feel at peace there. But I was still of an age where I did what my parents told me to do. I can't find the carol. So I still continued going to Sunday school with a varying amount of siblings as time progressed. You know, I am the eldest in my mum and dad's marriage. I was actually the eldest living of 9. I kid you not. So I'm actually the eldest of 6. Oh, and I've completely put that on the wrong symbol. Concentrate, Samantha. So I started off with the Enid Blyton stories, and then I got drawn, as I got a little bit older, into The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, and that series by C.S. Lewis. And invariably, if I was reading books, I would read books on Greek and Roman mythology. So, you know, gods and goddesses, all that sort of thing. And this continued throughout my early life. I did as I was told because I was a good kid. You know, we went to Sunday school. That's just the way it was. I particularly enjoyed hearing stories, hearing the fables about Jesus and stuff. So very much into the stories. As I got a little bit older, so I'm talking sort of 10 or 11. Now by this point, my interest had been piqued in things of a supernatural nature. So ghosts and spirits and hauntings and, you know, some of the old style horror films I quite enjoyed. But I also got into things like Grimm's fairy tales, which for anyone who has read the original Grimm's fairy tales, I am that kid that at 11 would sneak into the adult section. Do you know what I mean? Because there just wasn't enough to interest me in the kids section. So the original Grimm fairy tales, oh my word, I absolutely loved them. And my reading taste is very much fantasy, bit of science fiction. They do very often cross over. That is where I'm happiest, you know, and I will gobble that stuff up. So as I got into my early teens, I was then introduced to, what would I say it is? Divination. And I was actually introduced by my paternal grandmother. And she and my great aunt would sit with a pot of tea. It was still loose tea at that point. That's how friggin' old I am. And they would show me how they tell each other's fortunes by looking in the tea leaves. I think it was half done in jest most of the time. I could be wrong, in which case, Nan and Aunt Peg, I apologise. But the other thing that came out of it was that my Nan, and I believe my auntie, I think my auntie also showed me this as well, but they were showing how to read your fortune by using a deck of cards, which of course got me interested in tarot. So I then went off a whole tangent, and I am one of those people that if I get an interest in something, I will go all out to learn about that thing. You know, this is something that both me and Penny have in common. So I would get all the books. I wanted to know about tarot. I wanted to know about crystals. I wanted to know about Ouija boards and mirror scrying, you name it. Now this is the same sort of time that I got into The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Now I'd say I was about 10 when I read The Hobbit, but when it came to reading Lord of the Rings, I think it was a little bit harder for me, so I actually put it to one side until I was about 14. But yeah, I got into books about elves and goddesses and a lot of things about stories where trees came alive or they spoke, or the belief system was based on that sort of thing. Now, another thing happened, and I do apologise if I'm going off on a tangent. The other thing that happened is I was in an English class one day, and I wasn't one of the popular kids. I was a bit of a loner. I was a bit of a weirdo geek on the sidelines, and you know what? I'm happy with that, because that's just the way I've always been. But I was sitting in English class one day, and there was a bunch of girls, and they were giggling. You know the giggle, don't you? You know the horrifying sound of teenage girls cackling over something, and it transpires that they were cackling over a book, and this book really did open up everything. This book was called The Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean Auel, and the reason these girls had picked this book up was because one of them had realised there was some quite graphic writing in there about sex, basically, so they were cackling over that. That didn't interest me. What interested me was this book was written by somebody who worked in the field of prehistoric man, and she was an expert. She focused on that time period where we had the emergence of what would now be our type of person, and you had the Neanderthals at the same point, and it was basically a book on how these two civilizations met, and it sort of put across not just the way societies were formed, but their belief systems and the things that were found in those areas. And I was introduced into the theory of the great Earth Mother goddess, and I didn't have a pantheon at that point. So a pantheon is basically a group of gods or goddesses belonging to a particular belief system. I didn't have that. What I had was this understanding of being in a society, being in a place where my God, as such, was the earth itself, and how the earth gave back, the earth received. So if you think of a burial, the earth receives, they use that body as fertilizer to give back to the rest of the world. And alongside that, as an 11-year-old girl, I was then made aware, because I did some reading, of the link between a woman's monthly cycles and the moon and the tides, and how they're influenced by each other. And that opened up to me a feeling that this is where I belonged. I belonged with this nature-based belief system, and I didn't have a name for it. All I knew is that for me, the moon was female, the sun was male. I have over the years, I have voiced a name. So I have over the years used various names for the moon, but most of the time I just think of her as the moon. Simple as that. And that really triggered off. So as I got into my teens, I got more into books on the supernatural, those horror books that dealt with spirits and Ouija boards and all that sort of thing. It's too many to list, far too many to list. And as I grew older, I pulled away from the church. So I stopped going to Sunday school. I made it very aware that I was more interested in a nature-based system. And I went from there, and I just read a lot. So I was taught to read tarot cards many years later. So I can read tarot, I can read my tarot cards. And I quite enjoy that. I also got into crystal divination. So again, very earth-based. I truly believe that energy, and that's what this boils down to. It's not so much that I'm saying that I believe that there is a goddess of the earth who sits above us watching that stuff. It's all energy. My belief is that everything in this world has energy. People, plants, rocks, wood, machines. There's all energy. And some things hold energy better than others. So for me, I believe that crystals hold energy that we can then tap into for healing purposes, for meditation purposes, blah, 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 blah. So when I was in my early 20s, had a discussion with my father. Now, I passed this particular book, this Clan of the Cave Bear. There are 6. I know some of you will be familiar with these books because they were discussed by somebody else who's a YouTuber who read them. However, these books to me weren't just a story. These books were a basis for a belief system. And I was looking I was looking for what is this belief system, and I passed these books on to my father. And my dad, as you may have heard recently after his passing, my dad was the person that I shared these beliefs with. Me and my dad were very alike in that way. We weren't afraid to experiment. We weren't afraid to test out new things. My dad has been vegetarian at points. At one point he was following I think it was almost like a Hindu path. You know, we had these discussions about life and death and the afterlife and, you know, signs and symbols and all that sort of thing. This is the person I used to talk about with this stuff. So I passed these books on. My dad fell in love with these as well, and we would talk very often about what happens after death. Where do we go? Can people visit? Can they come back? But in all of those years, because I'm not a very social person, I have kept this belief system to myself. And things have happened to make me believe. So I'm going to mention some of them. I may not get them in the right order, you know, as usual, I am waffling. But what you need to know is that I tarnished myself, not tarnished, I gave myself very early on. I knew that my beliefs were pagan. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I'm quite happy to say that I believe in other. Because that's what it's listed on forms and stuff, isn't it? Are you Christian? Are you Muslim? Are you Hindu? Are you other? I'm other. Definitely other. And you know what? I am still drawn to all of those stories, those myths, those legends, those sort of things. So it is something which recently has come up. So here are some of the things over the years, and I am one of them people, I do go off on a tangent. You know, something will happen, I will look something up, and before I know it, I am chest deep in a bunch of books about something completely different. But let's go down this route. So things that have happened to me that I consider to be other. Many years ago, I was in my kitchen, and I left home at quite a young age. I had children at a very young age, and I instantly got hit with the thought that there was something wrong with my dad, literally out of nowhere. Now, my dad at the time was on holiday, but I knew that it wasn't awful. I knew it wasn't, you know, horrendous. I just knew that something wasn't right. Lo and behold, my dad comes back off holiday. He broke his ankle. Basically, he was climbing up a mountain. He was up Ben Nevis, and on the way down, he slipped on sheep poop and shattered his ankle. He did have rheumatoid arthritis, and you know, his ankles were quite weak. So I knew at that instant that something had happened. The same way that I will very often think of someone and then they ring me or they turn up, and this is not common just to me, this happens to everybody, and this is the thing that I want to put across. I'm not here preaching, but I want you all to think about how many times something has happened that you thought was a coincidence. So here is my stance. There are no, as far as I'm concerned, I need to point that out before I say what I'm going to say. As far as I am concerned, there are no such things as coincidences. There are things called synchronicities. They're two very different things. So this happens a lot. Something else that happens a lot. I will meet somebody for the very first time and I will instantly know whether that person is my type of person because I pick up on that person's energy. I can read people's energies very, very easily. I very quickly make my mind up on whether somebody is my type of person or not. Again, an ability everybody has. I may have to have a fiddle with my tape in my pen. It's not behaving. So, other things that had happened. When Kat was a little baby, we had, with my elder two, they didn't do scan pictures when I had my oldest. When I had my second child, my daughter, I was under the main hospital, not the maternity unit, because I was having issues during the pregnancy. And that particular scanner did not do photos, so I didn't have scan photos of her either. But when I had my youngest, I did. And I had my first scan, everything was fine. Had my second scan, everything was fine. Those two pictures were then put into a photo frame along with a photo of Kat when she was first born, laying in the same direction. I thought it was cute. And this picture then sat on the bookcase, and it was near a picture of Ashley's mum, who passed away sadly when he was in his teens, very quickly, very tragically. So anyway, Kat is about 3-4 months old, so old enough to be wriggling around and all that good stuff, but not old enough to be able to get up or to reach up or anything like that. And we had a cot mobile on the cot, so we used to take her upstairs. She was very good at sleeping, and we would put her in her cot and we would put the mobile on and we would leave the room, and she would be asleep before that mobile stopped. Basically, she was a very, very good sleeper. And this particular evening, me and my husband were downstairs, and suddenly, about 2 hours after she'd gone to bed, we heard that cot mobile going. So rushed upstairs, and lo and behold, there it was, just going off by itself. And I knew that Kat had moved because she dropped her dummy, so I put her dummy back in and went back downstairs, and we discussed it. Now, my husband, I'm a big believer in spirit visitation. My husband is not. So I turned round, as I would normally do, and go, that was your mum. That was your mum letting us know, checking in on Kat. And he was like, no, 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 it's just this, it's just that. So anyway, you know, a week or so later, I was talking to my mum. I was telling my mum about it, and she went, just big batteries, you know, batteries are eroded, they've gone a bit dodgy. And I went, Mum, it's a wind up toy, so it can't. So that was the first thing. There was no explanation. There was no windows open, no doors open, nothing. There was no breeze. That was the first thing. About 3 weeks after that, my eldest turned round, and we're sitting in the front room, and he says, Mum, have you ever noticed that there's a photo in that scan photo? There's a picture. And I'm like, no, what are you on about? And I absolutely kid you not, if you turned Kat's scan photo on its side, and we're talking about the 20-week scan here, you could clearly see a face of a woman in this scan picture. Now, I would show you this said picture. Unfortunately, because that picture was on the windowsill for so long, it's actually faded the scan photo, which I'm gutted about. But yeah, you turn it on this side, and I turned around and I got that picture, and I got the picture of Ashley's mum, and I literally turned around to him and said, tell me that that is not a picture of your mum on that scan photo. He couldn't deny it. It looked exactly like his mum. I firmly believe that she had been there. And let's bring it to me getting pregnant in the first place. And this is why I said I may not do it in order. I may go backwards and forwards as I remember stuff. I had my son, my eldest child, at just 16 as a single mum. The father, I don't even want to call him the father because he's not even that. The sperm donor was not interested in having anything to do with this child, so I brought him up by myself. I was just 16. I then had another relationship, and I had a miscarriage, an early miscarriage, which sadly is something which plagued me for most of my reproductive life, should we say. I then met my daughter's dad, and we very quickly got pregnant with my daughter. There were many problems with that pregnancy. I was dilated. I nearly said diluted. Diluted with coffee. I was dilated from a very early time. I had horrendous sickness. I mean, severe morning sickness. I practically could not eat for months. The upshot was that my daughter was born prematurely at 33 weeks, and I have a retroverted uterus, so basically my womb lays backwards. And what happened was, I was going backwards and forwards. She was in what they called the Skaboo unit back then. She was small, she wasn't unwell, she was just tiny. And I used to travel to the hospital twice a day to not only visit her, but also to express breast milk, because I wanted to breastfeed. I did with all my kids. I developed a womb infection, mainly because I wasn't resting. I was walking up there twice a day. So anyway, this womb infection also travelled into my fallopian tubes, which at the time didn't seem such a big deal. The upshot is, when my daughter was about a year old, because I'd had the other two quite close together, there was a 2.5 year gap between them. I didn't want to have massive gaps or anything, so we tried again for another child, and I just could not get pregnant successfully. And when I did, I miscarried early. It would be, 7 weeks, 8 weeks sometimes, 6 weeks others, and it kept happening. So we had some fertility investigation done. So turns out my husband's fine, and then it turns out that we found out that I actually had pelvic inflammatory disease. And what had happened, without going into too much detail, I have a feeling that this may be one of a couple of videos, because I've been on this for ages now. 38 minutes. I'm nowhere near where I need to be. So anyway, upshot was, I had some investigations done, and it turned out that my fallopian tubes were blocked with scar tissue. My ovaries and my fallopian tubes were stuck to my womb. My womb was stuck to my bowel. And I was told believe I was 22, I was told that I had less than a 2% chance of successfully falling pregnant, and that my best option would be IVF. Now, to be that young and to have that news would probably be devastating for somebody else. Of course it was, and of course I cried, but I had 2 children. I had a little boy and a little girl, although they had different dads, and although I was upset, it was a case of, you know, I have had 2 children. I've had something that other people will never have. So no, I'm not going to go down that road. It is what it is. You know, I'll learn to live with it. So the course of the time that me and my ex-husband were together, I got pregnant a couple of times. So I did get pregnant, but again, miscarriages. So when we separated, that was it. I had the 2 kids and that was it. When I met Ashley, if you don't know, is a toy boy. He's 7 years younger than me, which is not a lot. However, in terms of where our lives were, massive. I was 30. I had a nearly a 15-year-old and a 12, nearly 13-year-old. And Ashley was just 24. He had no children. I was his 4th girlfriend. He hadn't really had, you know, a lot of girlfriends or anything. And obviously we started seeing each other, and after about 6 months it was getting serious. We made the decision to move in together. But before we did that, we had to have the conversation about children, because with less than a 2% chance, and the fact that my son and daughter were young teens, we weren't going to be able to have children together. And he was okay with that. We were fine with that. So we decided to get a dog. He already had a dog that had belonged to his mum. So we moved in together, we got a dog, we were happy. Then my grandfather passed away. So what happened was probably about the month before, maybe 2 months before my granddad passed away, I actually collapsed at work, bleeding really heavily. My periods were very regular and very close together. I didn't get a lot of time between the two, and my grandfather passed away. So I collapsed at work, went to the doctors, turned out I'd had a miscarriage. I'd sort of said, no, not possible, I can't get pregnant, explained blah blah blah, and they said, well, no you were, but sadly. So I then had to explain to Ashley how I'd had a miscarriage. So this was probably about 4 months actually. So at this time I had tarot cards, because I've done that for years. I have crystals, blah 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 blah. Once I got pregnant, I decided to actively try and get pregnant so that Ashley could have a child. He wasn't bothered either way, I don't think. It was more me. It was my thing of, I've got to give it a go. I've got pregnant, so I can get pregnant. I just need some help. I need some help carrying this child. So just before my grandfather died, something happened. So I got 3 particular tarot cards, which are all to do with motherhood and pregnancy and good luck and all that sort of thing. And I bound them with a piece of paper. This wasn't something I got from somewhere. I made this up myself. And on this piece of paper, I asked the moon goddess, she didn't have a name, I asked the moon goddess to please help me. And I took that and I put those under my bed with a bag of white rice, because white rice is a fertility symbol, which is why people used to throw it at weddings. So these things went under my bed, and I put them under my bed on my side on a full moon, and I said what it was I wanted, and I left them there. And then a couple of weeks later, I was laid in bed and I had problems with insomnia. That's another story. And this particular night, I just had this completely overwhelming sense of what I can say was just pure joy and love wash over me. And anyone who has meditated will understand the feeling I'm talking about. It's that feeling you have when you have a meditation session where you come out of it feeling cleansed and relaxed. It was just so powerful. And I mentioned it to Ashley and I said, I think that was your mum. I think that was your mum coming to help. Didn't think any more of it at that point. Carried on with life. And then my grandfather passed away. I went to see him shortly before he died, which is how I prefer to see people if they're passing, if we've got warning. And, you know, told him I loved him and all that sort of thing. And then a few weeks later, well, not a few weeks later, about 3 weeks later, we had his funeral. And I'm at his funeral, and my auntie, she was an aunt by marriage, she came up to me and she was telling me how, since my grandfather died, she was having problems in her house. And basically her clothes horse, hopefully you'll know what I mean by clothes horse, an error, kept falling over, kept collapsing. And she'd gone to see a psychic, a medium. I am aware that they're not the same thing. Can I just point that out? I'm just saying what she told me. So anyway, this medium had said to her that it was my grandfather, because he hated clothes being on an error. He was very much needs to be on the bloody line no matter what the weather. And he hated them, so she was adamant. So anyway, she said this psychic had said something to her and she hadn't realised who the message was for at first. So I'm stood there talking to my cousin. My 2 children are with me at this funeral, and my cousin, who had had twins a few years before, turned around and said, I said, oh yeah, that's my son, that's my daughter. She goes, are you going to have any more? And I'm like, oh God, no. Do you know what I mean? They're nearly grown up. At this point, Jason is nearly 16. Rebecca is 14. Like, they were going to be off my hands. So I said, God, no. My auntie comes over and starts telling me this. And then she says to me, this is the message that she had. She said the message was for Sam. Tell Sam she can have what she wants now. That was the message. And I'm like, what? I was quite close to my grandfather. You know, he was a particular favourite of mine. I was a particular favourite of his. And this didn't make sense. This message did not make sense. I didn't have a freaking clue what she was on about. So I was like, well, thank you. I don't know what it means, but thank you anyway. 2 weeks later, I haven't had my period, and they were very regular. And me and my husband were due to go out on a drinking binge. Which we had also done the day of my granddad's funeral. We'd done the funeral and then we'd gone off that night with my brothers and we'd all got very drunk in a pub. But anyway, we were due to go out, and I'd mentioned to my daughter, who was staying for the weekend, she lived with her dad, and she said, don't you think you should do a pregnancy test? And I'm like, no, I won't be pregnant. I'm not wasting the money on a pregnancy test. I can get 2 or 3 drinks with that money. Oh, I think you should. I'm like, fine. So we go off to a local shop, pick up this pregnancy test, and this is how sure I was that it would be negative. I said to my daughter, she said, can I read it? Can I do the... And I'm like, do you know what? I will go and pee on this stick. And while I'm doing it, you make a cup of coffee. And if you do that, then I'll let you read the result. So off she goes to make a coffee. And I do the test and I come downstairs. She makes the coffee, she goes upstairs, and all I hear is, Mum, how many lines is there meant to be? So I looked at the box and I went, right, what, 1 line for negative, 2 lines for positive. And she goes, Mum, it's positive. I was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And she's going, Mum, it is positive. I'm like, really? So she comes running down the stairs. I took a look at it, I turned round, I looked at Ashley, and I went, oh my God, Ashley, I'm pregnant. And he looked white. This poor man, the colour drained out of his face, absolutely drowned out of his face. Now, of course, I was worried. I had been pregnant before, and hadn't managed to get past 7 weeks. So of course I was worried. If I was pregnant, I was no more than 6 weeks, but I was very excited, and suddenly everything changed. Was that luck? Was it my granddad passing? My granddad had a very, you know, my granddad, my father, in our family, in fact, we have a strong belief that when one soul passes, another is born. Was it because my granddad had passed that I was then able to have one? Was it the spell that I did? The ritual that I did? Was it Ashley's mum coming to I don't know. But with all of those things, here I am, and I'm pregnant. And not only am I pregnant, but I had a successful pregnancy. And I got the baby that I always thought I should have had. So I don't know. It could be any of those things. But do you know what? If one single thing out of that lot worked, then it was worth doing. Because it didn't hurt anyone, did it? So that is where my spiritual beliefs come from. So over the years, I have done rituals. I wouldn't call them spells. I don't like to call them spells. I've done rituals. I do try and live by this law of 3. Now, I do need to point out that I have taken a look at belief systems, pagan belief systems over the years. I knew looking at Wicca that it wasn't for me. I have always considered myself to be what they would have called hundreds of years ago a hedge witch. I'm just somebody that uses divination and herbs and plants and stuff, as opposed to using medications if I can. And I've always lived by this law of 3. And basically, if you wish someone ill, it will come back to you times 3. If you do something to someone, it will come back to you times 3. If you do good for someone, it will come back to you times 3. Because 3 was a very sacred number in a lot of pagan beliefs. However, I have never actually gone down the route of finding out what path I belong to. I've never felt the need. I knew I was going to meet Ashley before I ever met him, because I did a tarot reading for myself, which is unusual. They don't usually work. And I used a crystal. I use a crystal pendulum for divination, and that is my go-to. So over the years, I've done tarot, I've done divination, I have dreams. I have such vivid dreams, and always have done. And on occasions I've kept a dream diary. I very firmly believe that the dead can come and speak to you in your dreams. I think they find it easier. I firmly believe that the spirit world is literally a veil away. I really do. And that there is more afterlife, that there is a afterlife. And I believe it's a beautiful one. Would I say it's heaven? No, in my belief it's not heaven, but it is something nicer. And I have managed for 40 years quite happily with these beliefs. So I wouldn't task myself as having a label. I would have been, in the olden days, I would have been that little lady that lived in the cottage, that grew her own fruits and veg, and that used nettles to make tea and that sort of thing. That would have been me. Because I'm not adverse to believing this stuff. Where does that bring me now? And I do feel like I'm probably going to have to do another video on the rest of this, because I'm nowhere near done. I didn't realise I had all of this in my head. What has happened recently, basically, is I think especially with my dad passing, my dad was the person that I used to talk to about this stuff. He was the person that I would have these conversations with, and we had a conversation quite a long time ago where he said he wanted to be cremated because at that point in time, he was looking at Viking boat burnings. So it was my dad I would talk to about these things. You know, we would discuss how I had dreamed of my granddad, and my dad would go, do you know what, I got in my car the other day and I could smell cigarette smoke because my granddad smoked. He said, I know it was him. So he was the person I went to with all this stuff. And my dad had promised me, he said, I promise when I go, I will come back and tell you. And just before Dad passed away, somebody that I work with, I'm not going to say names or anything, but somebody that I worked with, when I started that job, we got talking and found out we were both into the same sort of things. We both were into tarot cards and crystals and all that sort of thing. And she had invited me to this spiritual circle. And I sort of said, you know what, I'd love to go, but my anxiety has always stopped me because I don't do well with groups of people. I don't. It triggers my anxiety. And she said, oh, it'd be really nice, you'd love it. It's right up there, you learn all these different things, blah, 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 blah. And I said, I've never really done that. I've always just done my own thing. You know, if I wanted to know how to cure a headache without using painkillers, I'd just Google it. And if it led me down a path of reading about paganism in one form or another, I'd carry on reading until I got bored. And I would take that thing. But I took things from many different religions and faiths and beliefs and all that sort of thing. I didn't actually stick to one thing. I knew Wicca wasn't for me. Can't tell you how I knew it wasn't for me. It just doesn't appeal. But I'm not against being called a witch. However, Dad passed away. He didn't come and see me. And this person kept saying to me, why don't you come with me to this circle? Why don't you come? So I decided. And I knew I had done the right thing because I'd said to her, please do keep asking because my anxiety will stop me going. But if you keep asking, sooner or later I will go. And she did keep asking. And I did go. And that was completely the wrong colour. I wasn't concentrating. And what I learned, my very first circle, I was explaining how my anxiety was so bad, and this person turned around and said to me, is it your anxiety though? Is it that you have anxiety, or is it that at some point recently you have become spiritually awakened, and that what you think is anxiety is actually empathy, where you're picking up on all of the energies around you, and because you're not trained, because you don't know what it is, because you don't know how to deal with that, you are processing it as anxiety. And I went, do you know what? Now you've said that, that kind of makes sense. So I went and did a little bit of research, which is always a good thing to do. If you don't understand something, research it. And I realised how right she was when it pointed out that actually I shy away from large groups of people because it's too loud, it's too bright, too many people are talking, it confuses my head, it makes me feel sick, it makes me want to hide. And suddenly it became clear, and that then sent me down a path of what is a medium. And that's kind of where I am right now. So there is a lot more to this. I have got other things that have happened that I haven't mentioned, but basically I have been going to this circle now for quite a while. I have been playing around with different things, and I am now researching a path that I think is much more my thing. So I will end this video because I'm very aware I cannot sit here for hours doing this video. It will take forever to upload. We're at an hour already. So I promise you that the next Wip video I will continue with where I am going. So currently I am reading Celtic Witchcraft, and I am researching the Spirit of Nature Oracle. This is the Ogham, the tree alphabet. This is something that the Druids used. And I am also reading Gods and Fighting Men. So the route that I'm looking at the minute is basically Old Irish, Celtic / Druidism, because they have a firm belief in the magic of trees, because that's something I'm always drawn to. Alongside that, the Tuatha De Danann is actually, they were gods of such, which were driven underground, and they became the she fairies, basically. I believe in trees and nature and the moon and the earth, and I believe in fairies. I'm going to leave it there. To resume, you will need to wait for the next Whip and Chat. Please do comment below if this is something you are interested in hearing more about, or even if it's not your thing at all. Please do not comment anything nasty directed at anyone. I do not wear any hate at anyone else's beliefs, etc. And believe me, when I say I believe in fairies, I do not mean Tinkerbell floating around with their magic dust. They're not the sort of fairies we're talking. I think it makes a lot of sense to be drawn to the old Celtic ways, because my family history goes back to Ireland, so it kind of feels like I'm safe, but I'm still researching, a lot of reading to do. But please comment below, let me know what you think. Did you find this interesting? Did you not? Give me a like if you did. And all you guys need to do, all you ever need to do on my videos, is give them a like, subscribe, because that would help me out, and to hit that notification bell. That's all you ever need to do. Just watch the video, that's it. And that will help my channel grow, and it will also help me fund my diamond painting addiction. Thank you for joining me for this unusual chat. I'll think up a nice name to call it when I edit the video, and I will do a part 2. Let me know what you think. I am off because I need to go to work, I need to get dressed, and I will be back very soon with another video. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is, as always, over and out from this Kitten Up Kitten. Bye bye.